Yes.
Fantastic. So again, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. It is a webinar series that's part of the School of Education Global and International Engagement Webinar Series. Our guests today we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Wanfei Huang and Dr. Vivek Vellanki. Dr. Wanfei Huang, Dr. Huang, her hometown is from Sichuan, but she now works in Guangzhou in South China Normal University in Guangzhou, China. And our own Dr. Vivek Vellanki is an assistant professor here in joint appointment in counseling and educational psychology, as well as in curriculum and instruction. And his hometown is Hyderabad in India. And so we are very fortunate to have them both. They are going to engage us in exploring the possibilities that exist in terms of reimagining the art of photography, in terms of the personal, in terms of our sense of belonging, as well in terms of educational research, practice, and methodology. Just so that you know the format. The format is 30 minutes of conversation between Dr. Huang and Dr. Vellanki. And then, the remaining 20 minutes or so will be a Q&A. And so you can post your questions anytime, and we'll watch out for them, and we'll share them with both of our speakers and who will engage with you most directly. All right, Dr. Huang and Dr. Vellanki, please take it away. We are so looking forward to your discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farida. It's good to see everybody on. I can see the names and some familiar folks. Thank you. Wanfei and I are really sort of excited about this conversation and this opportunity to be in conversation with all of you. We just want to say that we're glad that you're all here on a Friday morning or a Friday afternoon or a Friday evening. Wherever you are in the world, you could have been in many other places. So we're glad that you're here and sharing this time and space with both of us and sort of engaging with us. Would also love to thank Dr. Farida Pawan, Sulia, and Ross for making this happen, just the logistics of the webinar and also the invitation from the Office of International and Global and International Engagement at IU. My name is Vivek Vellanki, and I am extremely fortunate to be in a conversation with Dr. Wanfei Huang, who's a dear friend, artist, educator, and scholar from currently a postdoctoral fellow. And so one of the things that we're going to spend some time thinking about is about place and displacement. And we wanted to start by acknowledging in sort of different ways that all of us are living in places that have been sites of displacement ongoing for people and dispossession. So Indiana University, from where this webinar is being hosted, sits on the ancestral homelands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people. And for many of us in different parts of the world, that would also be true. And so to introduce Dr. sort of Wanfei Huang is a dear friend, and I didn't want to do a sort of formal introduction, but Wanfei and I have known each other for 4 or 5 years. And my fondest memories with Wanfei, this particular photograph which I made of Wanfei was during one of our sort of photography trips, and Wanfei and I would decide and walk together on Michigan State University's campus for hours at times, and sometimes for a few minutes. But I've always admired Wanfei's commitment to the practice of photography and sort of making. Even on the coldest morning, before I woke up, Wanfei would have posted a few photographs of what was going on in East Lansing on Instagram. And so today you will also see how Wanfei's commitment to sort of looking in place and photography sort of informs much of her thinking, and is in many ways a gift for all of us to think about the places that we inhabit, think about the role of photography in our sort of life and world. And so this is a delight for me and hopefully to all of you to have this opportunity. Wanfei, welcome, Wanfei. I'm excited. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Vivek. I'm extremely thankful and grateful for this invitation where I can talk with you and share my work. Really thankful.
Yeah, so let's start there. And I see that Lynn, your advisor and my dissertation director, is here in the audience. Hi, Lynn. So I wanted to sort of start us off by actually thinking about how you came to this work. So, in your sort of opening pages of your acknowledgement for your dissertation, you talk about how your training was in sort of rational educational theory, and that you couldn't have imagined doing an arts-based research if somebody had asked you that when you started the program. Can you share a little bit about your journey with photography, into photography, and how you sort of decided to do this in your work to focus on photography so closely and deeply?
Okay, thank you. So I think this journey starts my daily habit of smartphone snapshots after I came to the United States and pursued a degree in Michigan State University. The place itself, the scenery here, there now in Michigan, was very attractive. Like everyone having a smartphone, we took snapshots. But at that time, I think after a while, when I do that and share my photos on Instagram, it was noticed by my advisor, Lynn. And then in one meeting, she asked me whether I was really interested in exploring photography and maybe even make that as my dissertation project. I was so astonished. But that kind of initial encouragement was very important because at that time, taking photographs was therapeutic to me as well. It is both like a recording of my life there, observation of the natural scenery, but it was also therapeutic during a stressful stage. At the same time, while I try to make this practice of taking photographs in a more serious mindset, I was introduced to the educational research paradigm or methodology of arts-based educational research and photography. It was something I never knew, and it opened up my mind and makes me wonder how the practice of art making in a specific medium, can be very generative and inspiring for thinking about educational methodology and pedagogy. So then I was more and more engaged with practicing photography and just see how the process will teach me, inspire me, and trigger new thoughts about research methodology and pedagogy. Yeah, that's basically the simple story. Yeah.
I love that, because I think to me what stands out is that through your photography and in your dissertation too, you talk about it as iPhone photography, and I'd love for you at some point to help us think about why that's an important way for you to think about it. But what stood out from that answer was that you were paying attention to the world with your photography, and then Lynn was paying attention to what you were doing with photography. And I think this is a gift that Lynn often gives many of us, is the attention at what we are sort of interested in. And how did you come to the practice of iPhone photography itself? Was that something that you had done previously? Was that something that kind of, like you said, something that started only in Michigan when you moved?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think now when I reflect on this process, this journey, still continue to today, I think in the beginning, iPhone photography is just like a habit. Everyone has that. It was just subconscious, unconscious. We click the shutter whenever we see something interesting. It sometimes become even compulsive. But as I'm more and more engaged in this exercise, it's almost like I'm trying to learn how to write as a child, and then I become more and more reflective about the natural habit of clicking the shutter, and then gradually transform this practice to a more perceptual process. Yeah. So it actually, yeah, that kind of later serious engagement with this practice helped me to reflect about my previous daily habitual shutter clicking shutter on my smartphone, Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I feel like, become especially true in the last sort of 5-10 years, where all of us are carrying extremely powerful cameras in our pockets and making photographs all the time. Like, I think about how many photographs I make in a day or in a week, and sometimes I don't go back to them, but like I'm just clicking the shutter always. So appreciate that. And these are some photographs also that I just wanted to share sort of from your work. These are some that I've taken the liberty to bring from your dissertation work that's published online. And if people haven't read it, I encourage you to sort of look at it. I'm happy to put a link in here. And this is photographs you've made while walking. Could you talk a little bit about some of these images, or your process, or the ways in which you bring images together in your work?
Yeah, I think the 3 images are kind of the latter stage of my my dissertation, and that has before making these photographs, I have done exercise and over 1 year, and I try to kind of build a more close relationship with how I'm perceiving through and with a camera. And that's one dimension of that. And another dimension of that is how making photographs actually encourage me to have repeated walks in my everyday life, in place, on the campus. And it becomes a way of close observation. And in that process, I found several places I felt really comforting. So I went there repeatedly, observe, walk around, experiment with the camera functions to take photographs, to try to find something really surprising me, or just to capture the different nights there in Michigan. So the first photograph on left was taken by the University Pond. Yeah, I'm photographing the water reflection of my hand during the afternoon night. While at the same time, I use the camera flash. It's actually a very illuminating moment for me to have a more theoretical thought and pondering about my relationship with the landscape when I photograph with the camera as a friend. And the latter 2 photographs come from my daily walks along the Red Cedar River flowing across our campus. I was so obsessive with a different night in different season, and it's just wonder. It's just it was an experience I seldom experienced before I so engaged with photo walk. Yeah.
I love that. I think the phrase you used was obsessive with light in different seasons, and I really feel that when I look at your photographs. There's sort of and I've said this to you before, like just this quiet presence of light, but such a focused attention to how light shapes and shifts our world in significant ways. Like I'm just looking at the middle photograph, and this beautiful red reflection on the middle of on the water. We're sort of walking around some of these things that are happening, and these are, like you said, momentary, because for the light to fall on these leaves in this kind of way, it is a particular time of day, and it'll only happen at that time. And so you're sort of bringing our attention to these small moments using light. I love that. I feel like, to me, that's the gift you give. Your obsession to light and sharing that with all of us is like, just I could see it all day.
Thank you. And I would just want to add one notice that actually all the 3 photographs were taken with the camera flash on. So it's it was really surprising how that process of experimenting with a camera to photograph a place and to observe the final photographs inspire some poetic thoughts about light. I'm not just recording the sunlight with a camera. I'm actually recording or experiencing a kind of interaction between the sunlight and the camera light, and the camera eyes help me to capture that. So that's kind of a poetic inspiration from the process.
Sorry that I moved ahead. I was just looking at, I saw that there's a question. Casey has a question, but we're sort of eventually getting to that, Casey. So again, sort of thank you for bringing up this idea of light. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk to you about was you're thinking about using the camera in specific sort of ways, right? Like flash as a specific aspect of technology, and a way of also thinking about shaping light that already exists using technology like cameras. And you and I have both been obsessed with photographers and critics who write about photography, like people who practice photography, right? Thinking about light, thinking about working with the medium outside, say, the ways in which it's been talked about in educational research. I was rereading your dissertation sort of in preparation, and also just like, it's always a beautiful thing to look at your work. And you are citing photographers. Just throughout your dissertation, you're citing photographers who write about photography, and then critics, art critics who talk about it alongside educational scholars. But I love that you're sort of giving them sort of equal weight. This is not usual in educational research, right? But a growing number of scholars are doing this because we're interested in thinking about how the arts and the literary world can shape our own sort of scholarly thinking. Talk to us a little bit about that, and can you tell us why this is an important part of your research practice? Like, why do you think this is important for you to do, to turn towards the work of sort of photographers and artists?
Yeah, thank you, Vivek, for that question. Because actually, as you asked me that question, I'm also thinking about your newest published journal article, because you are doing the same. You are setting a varied artworks, photographic artworks by different photographers to really support your arguments about a more generative way of engaging photography in the educational research. During my dissertation, as I try to experience in what Maxine Graham's words, what it is like to live inside varied art forms. So for me, the beginning art form is photography. I really feel something that subverts my previous mindset about what counts as inspirations of knowing. Previously, it's coming from different educational theories, books, the papers. But as I engage with photographic practice, it's not just about me practicing making photographic work. I'm also intrigued by reading and encountering all the great photographic artworks by other artists. So in the process, I got to realize how they become an important source of inspiration and insights, because they're inspiration and insights for me to think about photography as a method for educational research and as a pedagogical heuristic. Then I cannot help but citing them because they constitute my journey of knowing. Yeah, and then in a furthering level, I'm still pondering about this issue is how, the artworks and related writings by artists and by critics are actually forms of knowledge. Because if we grant them as valid forms of knowledge, then I think you are doing a really good job here is then how, when we cite them, when we talk about them, when we engage them in our educational research paper, we're trying to embody that realization or kind of that acknowledgement. Yeah, it's still in process. Yeah.
That passion that you have for that argument is just coming through the screen, and I have to say thank you for shouting on my article too. But you and I shared when we were at Michigan State together this obsession with texting each other about photo books that we just seen. We're like, oh my God, have you seen Alex Soth's newest book? It's beautiful, you know. And then this new accordion book came out and I saw it in the library. Have you checked it out? So it's always been a delight to be in that conversation. And I agree with you, like there are some works that just move you in this sort of significant way. So I asked you sort of in advance, 3 photographers, and I think I got 2 right. Did I get 2 right? I think I got 1. I got 2 right. Can you tell us a little bit about it and invite people to also sort of see some of their work?
Okay, so I have 3 recommendations here today. 2 of the photographers who really inspire my practice and my understanding of photography and arts are 2 Japanese photographers, Rinko Kawauchi and Masahisa Fukase. Yeah, I'm not sure I pronounced that right, but they're really famous. For these 2 artists, I said them because encountering their photo books was really transformative experience. I seldom have, because I was transformed when reading their photo book. I cannot leave them out because I was transformed by encountering their work. And later on, I'm trying to do close reading, just like maybe other people encountering a great novel. Yeah, a great novel, another great piece of art. And they feel some part of them, some part of themselves are transformed. We try to do a close reading of them, and I cannot help try to imitate them in my own photographic practice. So, but at the same time, I think there are renowned artists who create and offer new imaginations about visual narrative in the medium of photo book. Yeah, so that exemplar artists. And they're not sharing photographs in separate photographs or just in an online gallery. Yeah, they are creating work in the medium of photo book through their how to say their grammar of page design, through their grammar of photo sequencing. Yeah, maybe later in a small video. Yeah, this kind of imitation because of their inspiration. The third one, Rebecca Lawrence Webb, I mentioned her because of another inspiration I got from practicing photography is I actually learned to read poetry because of photographic practice. I just feel a close relationship between the 2 art mediums. And she is one American photographer who is also a poet and who explored the originality between poetic images and poetry, poetic lines. And that's something I'm still pondering about. Yeah, because I'm so grateful that practicing photography brought me closer to reading poetry and understanding poetry. And even those poetry thoughts come back to my own understanding of poetic narrative in images. Yeah, so I want to share that. But I also want to say, I think the most important photographers to any individual are the photographers whose work transformed you when you encounter them, appreciate them. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Farida has given us a time warning. So let me jump. Actually, this is what we came here to sort of talk about. And so in your most sort of current work, the one that you shared with us that's been published, congratulations on that. You're thinking about photography as a practice of dwelling, really, like in space. And I want to quote you a little bit here. You write, quote, poetic dwelling. I am thinking of poetic dwelling as a newcomer to a huge and populated city. And this is after you moved back from East Lansing, Michigan to your current position. And you were sort of looking at the medium of the photo essay and thinking about how that relates to this idea of dwelling. And so maybe we'll just look at the video. Do you want to say anything, or should we just watch it?
No, yeah, there's an audio for this video, and I have a kind of artwork statement in the beginning. Yeah, you can just play that. Okay.
I've I've watched that many times, and I think every time it feels like a breath taken through the eyes. You know, like I just feel yeah, I don't know how else to say it, but like a breath that is taken through the eyes. That's what your work sort of often reminds me of. Farida is asking us to sort of move into the questions, and so if anybody who's here wants to share some questions, you can post them in right now. And as we're sort of waiting to sort of have some of those questions come in, I think I'll start off. I'll ask you one question to add another question to the layer. Is so you know, you're with this work, especially like the photographs that you've just shown us, you are helping us think about place where one lives, but also how one comes to be in a place. Like both you and I in different ways have moved to different parts of the world and lived in different places. And yet the idea of home is very sort of fluid. And so you're helping us think about what it means to be in a place, to be displaced, to come to a place new, and to sort of learn and be with what is immediately around us. Why is that important, and what is the connection to the world that we're living in? Why is that sort of practice and idea important to think about place in this kind of way?
I think my response will also address the question from, I think it's Cassie. Yeah, Cassie Pellington. Yeah, in the chat box. I think first of all, for the work just showed, I'm not expressing my emotions or thoughts or experience about displacement. It's kind of a temporary result. After I explore the issue, my experience with displacement after I left the United States, left Michigan, and then started to work in a strange and unfamiliar city. So the project begins with a sense of displacement. And in the beginning, I asked myself, because I have been engaging with the art form of photography, how can I explore this sense of displacement and to address my longing for a sense of dwelling with photography? And that's after certain periods of time, that kind of photographic narrative is my temporary answer for that. So for this case, displacement is the beginning point. It's the line. Yeah, it's the initial situation. I want to explore with that. And for the work we haven't got time to share for my dissertation, it's also displacement after I set my foot in Michigan Plain. And I think photography, the practice of photography also makes me to really think about walking. Yeah, because there are so many different forms of art writing about walking, travel writing, or other human geography, those creative writings about walking. It's just my personal entry point is photography. So for that, it's also that sense of displacement and emplacement. But on the other hand, I'm also imagining, during holidays, when I go back to my hometown, the place I really feel kind of at home, I was familiar with, I just feel, I just have another rush. I want to see how I can displace myself in a place where I felt familiar, or even I felt constrained, or I felt I was bounded by something, by something I tried to break away through this journey of going to other places. Yeah, so it's kind of a creative tension that I find photography to help me explore that. But I think other people may use poetic writings or painting or other art forms. Oh, sorry, yeah. Just hope I don't use too much time.
I think like the comments here that you see to both of your work, a comment from Lynn says, it brings tears to my eyes to hear both of you dwelling in such beauty. That's incredible. We share the same emotions. And so I think the next question is from Anne Romero, and I'm going to post this to both of you. Many questions and curiosities here. First, I'm a second-year doctoral student online from LA, hello, in art education at IU. Having a background in photography and art history, I'm struck by the distinct lack of photographs and art images in the academic field of education and even in art education. I was wondering whether either of you had any insight, thoughts, or feelings about that. So either one of you can respond, please.
Maybe Vivek, you go first.
I think I want to turn to what you said at the beginning of this conversation. I think that's a beautiful question. And thank you for joining us from LA. It's early there, earlier there. But my answer is that that is an unfortunate predicament, but I think I would state that absence as an absence only in specific journals and spaces. I think kind of like Wanfei is saying that a lot of people are practicing this, a lot of people are doing this, whether we have the space to think about it in this way or sort of share it or not. We're all sort of involved in the process of thinking and creating with images. And so to me, it's unfortunate that it doesn't exist, but I see a lot of people pushing this work in sort of generative directions. Please, and I'll put a link in the chat, go see Wanfei's dissertation. She has a supplemental file where she made a photo book. And so to me, that is another signal where people like Wanfei are pushing the field and saying, hey, let's think about it in a different medium. And when you experience Wanfei's photo book, you can see it and feel it, that that's the medium that it has to stay in. So I feel like it's a lack, but it's also an opportunity and an invitation for us to think about different forms.
I think the other question that comes, I think it's still from Anne, and she's asking about the experience of dislocation about areas. And she went to China, and she came back into the US. And so she's trying to make photographs about the idea of dislocation when she returned back to the US. I'm wondering, she asked, whether either of you have felt this in return visits to India or China and made sense of that sense of dislocation through photographs.
Farida, I'm just going to share my screen for one more second because sure. I think and put Wanfei on the spot. Sorry, Wanfei, I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to do it because I think this was one of the things I wanted you to share about is Wanfei's work called Missing Mountain, which became part of Wanfei's dissertation. And I think Wanfei, can you talk a little bit about the specific question, but also you were using family photographs that were made in China and photographing them in East Lansing. And you're using physical objects to create sort of this dissonance between the image and the place, between moving, migration and home and family. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I guess in that way, sort of answer the question.
Yeah. Okay. I think when I made my dissertation project, one realization can emerge in my experience is how deep engagement with a place through walking and photographing can trigger memory. So as I try to really push myself to think about how I explore this feeling and experience of memories of hometown in a foreign land, and through photography, through creating a visual work, and in the process, it kind of came to me as it started with a kind of a spark, and later on I try to explore that because it's kind of intuitive way. I bring pieces of my memory back in my hometown, the portrait of the little me, and then place it in the corners of Michigan Plain. And in the process, it helps me to feel through the multiple layers of the feelings while I walk on Michigan Plain. Yeah, I think about the mountainous area I was born and raised, Yeah, I think about the different experience of mobility, of moving in those two different places. And it gradually became a metaphor. I think it really emerged through the process of repeated walking in the same place or in corners you feel just, you just feel attracted to. And in the process, the kind of metaphor will emerge in your heart. And then later on, you more, consciously explore that metaphor through experimenting the themes of the photographs. Yeah. So for the question, let me see if I whether felt this. So actually, for my dissertation project, as I was walking in a foreign land, yeah, memories of my hometown just came up, and I tried to explore that through photography. But right after I came back to China, for the slideshow, I'm just exploring another, unfamiliar place. And my relationship with my hometown is an unfinished project. Yeah, it's actually an unfinished project. Even my relationship with Michigan, with my journey, PhD journey in another land, and right now I'm far away from that. So how I explore that is also the issue, unfinished project.
Those are incredible thoughts. The way for those of us who move between places in the world, the way you recount that experience and how you sort of relocate that experience, not just in one place, but in many places, is inspiring. Vivek, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm putting you on the spot here, not so much on the spot, but here in terms of trying to learn from you. This is a golden opportunity for us. One of the questions, there are two things that came in through different channels. One is listening to images, and that's a concept, I think, that needs to be explored. What do you mean listening to images? The other is that I think you, in your writing, challenged the idea that art space researchers, such as yourself and Wanfei, you denaturalize traditional qualitative approaches. To some extent, you are upending to the traditional concept of what qualitative approaches to research is. So can you talk about one or both?
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Farida, for that question. I'd say listening to images is not something that I've coined. That is Tina Campt. The book, Tina Campt also has a book called Listening to Images from Duke University Press. Introduction is available freely. I'm not getting paid to say this, but please read it. It's a beautiful book. And to me, what I love about Wanfei's work is that it's when I said it, that looking at her essay was like taking a breath in through the eyes. It also was like listening through the eyes, like what other sensory perceptions can we sort of bring to the way we engage with photographs. And I think I like that idea because to me, what it does is essentially, we're very habitual in how we engage with images. We are very quick to sort of read. And so to shift a sensory mode is to sort of relearn what it means to see. And the way Tina Campt talks about it is that there's a quietness in the image that one has to attend to by thinking about it in sort of different ways. I'm drawn to that. And the images that Wanfei is using, for instance, as an example here, is creating that dissonance between what an image might have been made for and how we can sort of think about it, engage with it, and read it in a different way. I love, to me, that's a useful sort of analytic. On the second question, I don't know if Wanfei will agree with me. I think our goal is not to upend traditional qualitative research. I think sometimes it can be framed oppositionally, and I have framed it myself in the past oppositionally. I think more and more, I want to stop doing that. I'm interested in expanding, sort of increasing the possibilities rather than saying one is upending a particular sort of practice. And to me, the most important thing about that is that nothing that, at least I feel, and I'm sure Wanfei will agree, that either of us is doing is absolutely remarkably new or original. And I think the way that we acknowledge that is by citing artists and photographers who've done this for hundreds of years, as long as a practice and medium of photography has existed. So to us, it's asking academia, asking ourselves and as academics to turn and pay attention to those things that people have been doing in the world for very many years, and to join in on that and to learn from that and to enjoy the beauty and sort of brilliance in all of that.
Yeah, I may add on what Vivek sharing. So in the first question, listening to images, I'm thinking about how in the process as I practice photography, because it's also, you know, it's an art form. Many established artists have explored, you know, multiple mediums and possibilities. I'm thinking how listening to images is a practice of listening or feeding with the image as objects with really effective intensity. And when we try to think about using art forms as alternative format, you know, for presenting research or something, it's not replacing the previous ones. I'm thinking about how that's a process or practice of curating that effective intensity with those objects, art or objects, instead of merely analyzing them and presenting them in a traditional format. And we are really, I think both Vivek and I are inspired by how the art mediums and the artworks can be an alternative form of engaging with educational inquiry. Yeah. And in a lot of sense, we can still call that as educational research or qualitative research or arts-based research. Yeah, just
yeah. I mean, it's you know, it really is. I mean, I'm reading both of your work. It's really eye-opening and it shifts thinking. You know, the title of Vivek's piece is shifting the frame. You know, I think it's such an apt metaphor because it takes you some other place. I mean, it also challenges you in terms of when you think about educational research. One of the phrases that I'm quoting here from Vivek's article from Loveless 2019, you know, through photography, there are two things, right? We're unpinning our allegiance to discipline and to work non-innocently from within. And so in a sense, if you do educational research, you go, okay, to work non-innocently from within, that, you know, somebody will problematize that. You know, what kind of research are you doing, right? If you're working non-innocently from within, you know, so I want you to, if you could, please respond to that, because when we talk about inquiry, those kinds of things come up. I hate to take it to a non-beautiful place because we've been talking such beautiful ways of thinking and knowing, but I just want, you know, to kind of us to explore a little bit, because we have a responsibility in research. We have also a responsibility to inquiry, to ensuring that, you know, that we've done the best that we can. Any thoughts to share?
I'd say specifically on that sort of phrasing of non-innocently from within, I think also, as Wanfei was saying, of this affective intensity, I love that phrasing, like a collection of energies almost. To me, the idea of non-innocently from within is actually an acknowledgement that the history of qualitative research in any realm has been a history of sort of violence and dispossession for the most part. And so to acknowledge that and to sort of foreground that and to also sort of take that on as people who are still inside these institutions, I feel complicit also in some of that responsibility working within universities that have caused harm in many ways and to many communities. And I think it's a hard thing to sit with, but I think it's a responsibility that one has to sort of take and acknowledge. And so how do we be within these spaces and also sort of work against them, work against the project of the capitalist academy? I don't think I have any answers, but it's a question that I sort of constantly wrestle with. And yeah, maybe Wanfei, do you have some thoughts?
I was actually from what I read, I think Vivek has been doing brief work to theoretically, talk about methodologically talk about that issue in your journal and trying to position yourself in a landscape of different research paradigms for education. And I think for me, how this arts-based practice or research really helped me to think about doing educational research with quality. It's a different entering point. I think is for me, how the process of and the practice experience of art making for me through the medium of photography has become a pedagogical inspiration that I didn't experience before I practiced making art. And in that process, I feel the firsthand experience of making art helps me to rethink about the maybe kind of fundamental role of arts for education. It's like arts is not a kind of curriculum part, dimension. It's just one part of curriculum or something. How it becomes a kind of fundamental inspiration for both pedagogy and research. So it kind of, for me, fundamental entry point is pedagogical. So after I started practicing, I get to understand some theories of arts and arts education in a different light. Yeah, in a different light, and I'm trying to write about that. So for me, it starts from this very personal point of view, but the challenge, as you may ask, is how I can maybe go beyond this point, go beyond this personal journey of kind of emancipation or something through art making. Yeah, to think about how the practice of art making can contribute or can offer me new thoughts about human becoming. Yeah, how I'm shaping myself and shaping my relationship with the world through this practice. So for me, it's not just getting a set of skills or something. I think that's also what Vivek may agree. Yeah, to really think about the role. And I think there are several renowned scholars in the United States that really have talked about that. Edith Eisner, Maxine Green, yeah, for me.
Yeah, I mean, inspiration as research, and we talked earlier about identity as pedagogy, but inspiration as research too. That's a new thought, actually, that you've brought forth. Now, the other thing that I saw in terms of both of your work is the decentering of power, because you talk about the power of photography, the person photographed, and the act of photography itself. And you mentioned two things, which is photo voice and photo elicitation. Those, when those approaches were first developed, they're about giving the power back to the people who are being photographed. But you've also complicated that. You've problematized that decentering of power to essentially the research, right? The photographed. Do you want to talk about that in a few minutes that we have? Oh, it's 9:30. My goodness.
You are in a better position to answer that. Yeah, you really tackle that issue. Would you want to share?
Yeah, yes, and I want to say that photo voice and photo elicitation, like the work that Wanfei and I are able to do now, has been because of some of the history of that work, and I think it's important to, in this way, sort of acknowledge the ways in which that work allows us to do the work that we're doing right now. And I think I love the phrasing that Paris and Aline use, that this is not a critique to dismantle, but it's a loving critique. It's a loving critique to shift sideways and imagine all these other possibilities. And I think when I see Wanfei's work, I can sometimes see how people might say that it is not political. But to me, the political weight of work like that is the quietness of it. And so to me, sometimes, not always, photo voice can have an explicit focus on articulating everything, a relationship between a photograph and the text, to share what it means, what to profess sort of in clear ways what those connections are. And sometimes that can be generative, but sort of not always. And I'm interested in also thinking about the quiet ways in which the politics of the everyday can show up, or what happens if we shift our gaze in a different direction. And so when I see Wanfei's work, I think about cities and how we're made to think about cities as spaces of productivity, sort of consumption and movement. And Wanfei is bringing us to all these sort of quiet moments that one doesn't necessarily see. So all that to say that very many different ways for us to sort of think about how to see, where to see, what to see, and what the person who's making those photographs is allowing us to sort of see, think, and imagine in the world.
Wanfei, do you want to say anything like that? I mean, it's not the, it's the sharing of power when you talk about photographs and photo voice and photo elicitation. And I think what you both said is that that's not it. That's not only it, right?
Yeah, I think actually I'll maybe share a little bit the inspiration get from Vivek's article is how related to power. I think is how we rethink about what count as qualified analysis or interpretation with photography and photographs in a research paper. I think for photo voice and photo elicitation, they rely on certain assumptions about data and data interpretation. But at the same time, I think what Vivek and I are trying to explore in our work is how about other effective forms of presenting art, curating images. They're not photo voice, they're not photo elicitation, but they offer certain or inspire certain modes of knowing. And can we do that with photographs by ourselves or with photographs by the participants? Because it's interesting, I'm mainly working with my own photographs, but also Vivek has done projects really working with participants to create artworks. And I think actually, Vivek, yeah, if there is more time, you can really share about it. You are not using photo elicitation, you are not using photo voice, but you are doing participatory research work and then present them in a non-photo voice way, yeah. And how that forms of research analysis and research presentation can become powerful or can be counted and really acknowledged as a valid research. And I think that practice is kind of decentering the power of what we count as qualitative educational qualitative research with photography and photographs.
I want to take both of your classes. Unfortunately, we have reached our time, the 1 hour. Is there anything that you want to bring up that you want to share with the audience in the minute that we have with the audience? Something that's left unsaid that you would like to share?
I just want to say I'm really extremely thankful and grateful for this opportunity, for this invitation. Thank you. Thank you.
Same. Thank you, Farida. Thank you, Sulia. Thank you, Ross. And most importantly, thank you, Wanfei, for, I know it's like late in the day for you when you're doing this from your office. Thank you always for your time and your work and your care. And I'd say one thing I would like to say is, for those of you who might be interested, please take up the invitation that is in Wanfei's article. And we talked about this as Wanfei giving each of us a prompt to sort of think about place and displacement. Thank you for offering that to us. And yeah, this has just been a beautiful way to start a Friday morning. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, we thank you both, and to all of you who are in attendance. This session, the recording of this session will be shared widely, and so you can revisit the discussion. And please stay tuned for the October webinar series, which we can, we have a lot big shoes to fill. This webinar was exciting and thought-provoking. Thank you again, Wanfei and Vivek. Have a good
Yeah, thank you.
day.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Regila. Yeah, familiar names in the chat box. Thank you.